There is a moment in history when time seemed to stop. A moment where every atom, every particle suspended in the air, bowed before a single word. It wasn't a lengthy speech. There was no echo of crowds. Just a statement, spoken at the exact moment of death, that traversed millennia to reach here, to you, Tetelestai, a Greek word, simple but shrouded by a veil of mystical, historical, and cosmic layers. And what if this word was not just the end but the beginning of something we are only now starting to decipher? For many, Tetelestai means "it is finished," a legal term of the time, used when a debt was fully paid. But something doesn't fit. Why, amidst pain and blood, would Jesus choose a bureaucratic phrase to end his mission? Was this the best choice for the most sacred moment of his journey? Or perhaps this word had a vibrational charge, a sound structure that activated something beyond rational understanding, something that connects directly with the subtle layers of the earth and the human soul. In ancient Greek, words were not just means of communication. They were seen as living entities endowed with creative power. Tetelestai, in its root teleo, carries the notion of fulfilled purpose, completed mission, finished cycle. And this is where the mystery begins. At the exact moment that this word was pronounced, the biblical account asserts that the temple veil was torn. An earthquake shook the ground. The skies darkened. Nature reacted, as if that word had triggered a multidimensional collapse. Is it possible that Jesus' last words were more than just a simple conclusion? What if they were, in fact, a sonic key? A code that, when emitted with pure intention and extreme sacrifice, activated something hidden in the Earth's energetic grid? Modern science already proves that words carry frequency. And more than that, the way we pronounce something changes its vibrational effect. Emotions, intentions, even the state of the heart interfere with what is emitted to the quantum field. What could have been released into the universe with that last breath? Tetelestai was not spoken in a tone of defeat. On the contrary, the Gospels indicate that Jesus cried out in a loud voice before releasing his spirit. This changes everything. It wasn't a muffled, agonizing speech. It was a decree, a release, a seal. Jesus, in his last action as an incarnate, chose a specific word and uttered it with enough force to be recorded by witnesses and echoed for centuries, as if he had left a vibrational seal, a final sound loaded with spiritual information. Imagine for a moment crucifixion as a vibrational rite, an event that united human suffering, divine sacrifice, and sound frequency to release a sacred code. The ancients knew this. Entire civilizations built temples and pyramids based on sound resonance. Chants and mantras were used to alter states of consciousness. And what Jesus did there was no different. He didn't just die. He activated. Something was sealed there, something that transcends religion and directly touches the vibrational field of life. In the field of quantum physics, we know that intention and observation shape reality. We also know that words have the ability to shape invisible structures, from water molecules to mental patterns. When Jesus declared Tetelestai, he not only communicated an end, he transmitted a vibration capable of triggering transformations on the physical, emotional, and spiritual planes, like a code that lies dormant until it finds the same resonance pattern to be activated again, perhaps now, at this very moment in history. The temple veil was torn, but what was truly torn there? The boundary between the visible and the invisible? The separation between man and divinity? The symbolism is profound. Until that moment, only the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies, once a year, to intercede for the people. But with that tearing, access became collective, universal. And it was released by a word, not by a sword, not by a ritual, but by sound, the right sound, at the right time, with pure intent. Is there anything more powerful than this? Since ancient times, spiritual masters from various traditions have always pointed to sound as the origin of creation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, says the Gospel of John. This is not a poetic metaphor, but a spiritual technology. Sound is the bridge between the material world and the invisible. And Jesus, as a master of sound and intention, sealed his mission with a frequency that resonates to this day. It's no wonder that so many people, even without understanding the literal meaning, feel a chill when they hear the word Tetelestai. There are those who say that a person's final words reveal the essence of their soul. In the case of Jesus, his last words carried not just meaning, but the release of a cosmic energy, a sonic signature imprinted on Earth's morphogenetic field, a vibrational password. And like any password, it can only be used if you are on the right frequency. Perhaps part of the spiritual call that so many people feel today, this urge to awaken, to seek something greater, is an unconscious response to that broadcast made over 2,000 years ago. The question that echoes now is not, what did he mean, but what did he activate by saying? If Tetelestai is not just a word, but an energy field, are we ready to access it? Were the codes left there intended for us, who live in a time when science and spirituality are finally reconnecting? Was the vibration released on that cross sown at the right time to bloom exactly now, when the earth, more than ever, needs to be torn apart from within and reborn? The crossing begins here, and the path is not only in the texts or doctrines, it's in the subtext of the vibration, in the frequencies that Jesus sowed with his voice. Tetelestai was not the end, it was the ignition point of a journey that has just begun, and as we delve into the torn veils of this story, we may discover that the code is not out there, it's resonating within us. The Temple of Jerusalem was more than stone and gold. It was a symbolic architecture of human consciousness. At its heart, there was an immaculate, inaccessible space called the Holy of Holies. There, only the high priest could enter once a year to intercede for humanity. And what separated this space from the rest of the temple and from the outside world was a veil. A thick fabric embroidered with ritualistic precision that was not just a physical curtain but a sacred divider between heaven and earth, and it was precisely this veil that was torn the moment Jesus gave up his spirit. The biblical description is clear, almost abrupt. And behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, Matthew 27:51. A physical phenomenon that occurs in sync with a spiritual verbal emission. But why is this so significant? Because the veil was the ultimate symbol of separation between the human and the divine. Its rupture represents more than a symbolic event, it's a vibrational deconstruction of a paradigm. It is the collapse of an energetic boundary that kept humanity divided between matter and spirit for centuries. And it was not torn from bottom to top, as a man would do. It was from top to bottom, the inversion of human order, as if the universe itself responded to Jesus' final word, as if the energetic structure that separated the spiritual planes had received a command and obeyed. The sound of the word Tetelestai and the tearing of the veil seemed then not distinct events, but parts of the same process, the release of a code and the opening of a portal. The veil, in its thickness and opacity, represented the collective unconscious, the part of the human psyche where God was distant, unreachable, a mystery reserved only for the pure. But Jesus always challenged this logic. He touched the impure, spoke with sinners, brought the divine into everyday life. His final act was not a death, but an unveiling. The torn veil announces, the divine is now accessible. The portal that separated illusion from truth has been broken, and no one can sew it back together. Interestingly, this same idea of the veil appears in several mystical traditions. In Hinduism, Maya is the veil of illusion that obscures reality. In Sufism, the veils are the layers that separate the ego from the vision of God. In Kabbalah, the Kalipa is spoken of, spiritual shells that prevent access to divine light. In all these traditions, the spiritual path requires the tearing of layers that cover the sacred. Jesus, with his final word, did this not only on an individual level, but collectively. He tore the veil of humanity. But what does this mean in energetic terms? If the veil was an energetic membrane between planes of existence, its rupture represents the release of previously contained frequencies. It's as if the Earth's vibrational field, which kept certain frequencies isolated, had been reconfigured. From that moment, new spiritual waves began to circulate. Access to the Holy of Holies, which was previously restricted, became an internal possibility. The earth was initiated into a new cycle of awakening. In modern times, studies of consciousness indicate that our brain has layers, from the most superficial to the deepest, that resemble the levels of the temple. The outer layer is sensory, the middle layer, emotional, and the core, the sacred silence. The pineal, located in the center of the brain, is regarded by many traditions as the throne of God, our inner holy of holies. The tearing of the veil, therefore, was not only external, it echoed within human consciousness. It also tore the barrier between the ego and the higher self. And this is where science approaches spirituality. Experiments with deep meditation, altered states of consciousness, and sound resonance show that there are internal portals that open with the right stimuli, sounds, words, frequencies. Jesus, by emitting his final sound, may have given Earth a master frequency to open these portals. The torn veil became not only a symbolic event, but a vibrational password that still operates today in those who achieve deep states of presence. The question that arises is, what exactly was released there? Could we be facing a spiritual field that had been dammed up, like a river blocked for millennia, and that at that moment found a gap to flow? Direct access to the divine without intermediaries is a revolutionary concept that challenges religions, systems, and spiritual hierarchies. Perhaps for this reason, the tearing of the veil has been so ignored or minimized over the centuries. It's an event that removes the power from the mediators and returns the sacred to the awakened individual. Not by chance, the Gnostic traditions, so persecuted, claimed that the kingdom of God is within us. That access to the divine does not depend on temples, but on vibration. That the true temple is the body, and the Holy of Holies is in the internal spark that connects to the all. The torn veil then becomes a symbol of a new paradigm, one in which the seeker does not look outside but quiets, breathes, and enters. Jesus did not found a religion. He opened a portal. This portal is not physical. It is not in Jerusalem. It is in every being that aligns with the frequency of that word. It is in every heart that, instead of judging, feels. It is in the profound silence where the mind ceases and the spirit speaks. The earth, from that day, has never been the same. And we, even unconsciously, live under the field of this tier, this space where the mystery found passage. Now, there is an invisible line that crosses through time, the line that separates those who only believe from those who access. When we talk about veils, we also talk about perception. And everything Jesus did, especially at his end, was to restore sight. He tore what blinded, freed what imprisoned. The curtain did not hide God. It hid man from himself. And at that moment of word and death, this curtain fell. The code was unlocked, the portal was open, and humanity would never be the same again. Everything in this universe vibrates. Each cell, each atom, each thought, everything pulses in a silent symphony that crosses the veils of time and matter. And the Earth, our living planet, is not outside of this orchestra. It too has a heartbeat, a unique, deep, constant pulsation. This pulse was discovered in the 50s and was named the Schumann resonance. It is a natural frequency emitted between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, originally oscillating around 7.83 Hertz, the same rhythm as brain waves in a deep meditative state. Coincidence or shared language? When Jesus issued his last word, what few understand is that he was, in fact, in total alignment with this frequency. His body in pain, his mind surrendered, his soul in absolute surrender, all put him in a state of maximum coherence. And in coherence, the sound that is pronounced takes on another nature. It ceases to be noise and becomes a key. The sound emission that comes from a being in total alignment with the source vibrates in unison with the planet's electromagnetic field. And when this vibration is released at a moment of transition, like death, it does not just echo, it encodes. What was encoded at that moment? Science, still in its infancy in understanding vibrational language, shows us that certain sounds, emitted at certain frequencies, reorganize chaotic patterns. Water exposed to words like love forms harmonic crystals. DNA responds to music. The heart enters coherence when we hear harmonic sounds. If these principles are true on an individual level, what happens when a being fully aware of its mission issues a decree at the exact moment of death? What was generated there may have been more than a message. It may have been a field. This frequency, the same as Earth's, is referred to by some traditions as the frequency of truth or the pulse of creation. It has the ability to access the field where past, present, and future collapse. Jesus, by surrendering completely, ceased to be an individual and became pure frequency. He merged with the field, and his final word was not only heard by those at the foot of the cross, it was picked up by the entire vibrational grid of the planet. That's why the veil tears. That's why the earthquake. The earth did not respond to the suffering. It responded to the vibration. This understanding leads to a revelation. The planet is not a spectator of the spiritual plan, but a co-author. The earth participates in the grand movements of consciousness. When an awakened being like Jesus reaches his peak of surrender, the planet also moves. In various ancient traditions, from Native Americans to Andean shamans, the earth is spoken of as a living mother who feels and responds. The crucifixion then was also an act of co-creation between Christ and the planet. The final word was not only the end of a mission, but the emission of a new tone in the symphony of humanity. Interestingly, in recent years, the Schumann frequency has shown unprecedented fluctuations. On some days, it reaches unexpected peaks, with resonances surpassing 30 Hz. For spiritual scholars, this is more than an anomaly. It's a sign. The earth is vibrating higher. It's tuning into another station. Could it be possible that this process, initiated 2,000 years ago, is now accelerating? Could it be that the code emitted by Jesus was dormant, waiting for the right time, and that time is now? The spiritual language has never been verbal. It has always been vibrational. The spirit doesn't communicate through words, but through resonance. This is also true in the Hebrew tradition. The name of God, the tetragram YHWH, is not a word to be read. It's a sound to be felt, a breath, a vibration. So too is the final word of Jesus. More than meaning, it carries a sound, a field, an energetic signature that echoes in the collective unconscious and can be accessed by those who learn to tune in. And how does one tune into this field? It's not through doctrine, it's not through effort, it's through frequency. States of deep gratitude, meditation, silence, and emotional surrender place the human being in resonance with this ancient frequency. And when this happens, it's as if a forgotten memory awakens, a memory that is not of the mind, but of the spirit, the memory of the open portal, of the frequency pronounced at the most sublime moment of sacrificial love. It's the reunion with the origin, not as a concept, but as a vibration. This spiritual language was understood by all the great masters. Buddha spoke in silence, Krishna in music, Jesus in vibration. They all knew that what transforms is not what is said, but how one vibrates. When Jesus cried out, Tetelestai, he not only declared the end of a mission, he altered the vibrational signature of the planet. Since then, Earth carries a new pulse, an additional tone, an invitation hidden in the sound of the wind, in the melody of the water, in the silence between heartbeats. It's no coincidence that so many people today feel a calling they do not understand, a yearning for something they cannot name. This deep restlessness, this silent search, is the vibrational response to the field sown by that sound. We are living in the time of the echo, the time when the call issued 2 millennia ago begins to be heard, not with the ears, but with the spirit. The Earth's frequency is awakening us because it was encoded with absolute love. And love, when it vibrates in silence, moves everything it touches. The language of the spirit, therefore, is a frequency. And this frequency was activated by a word that didn't end. It only began. The vibration that Jesus emitted is not in the books, it's in the fields. It's on earth. It's within you. And the secret to accessing it is not in repetition, but in resonance. Tuning in to the state of surrender, submission, unconditional love. When this happens, the veil is torn again. The portal opens. Death transforms into beginning. The frequency becomes presence. Thus, when we seek to understand what was left on the cross, we must set aside logical questions. The answer is not theological, it's vibrational. Jesus left a sound, a field, an invisible language that is, right now, trying to tune in with your soul. And the only way to hear it is to deeply quieten. What if Jesus' greatest legacy wasn't only in the Gospels, but imprinted within us, silently encoded in the microscopic sanctuary of our cells? What if every word spoken by him, especially his last, was designed not to convince the mind, but to rewrite the vibration of our own DNA? The human being is much more than flesh and blood. It's a biological structure highly sensitive to vibrational fields. And within this structure, at the core of what makes us, there's something that pulses in response to the primal sound, the DNA. Traditionally, DNA has been seen as a simple repository of genetic inheritance, but the discoveries of recent decades are changing this view. Epigenetics has revealed that the environment, emotions, intentions, and yes, sounds have the power to switch genes on and off. What's more, studies on biophotons, light particles emitted by our DNA, suggest that cells communicate through frequencies. This leads us to a fascinating point. Our cells have ears. They listen, vibrate, respond. And what Jesus said, or rather vibrated, may have been not only heard, but recorded in our internal structure. Imagine then an event of spiritual magnitude such as the crucifixion, where a fully awakened being emits a sound charged with absolute intention. This sound, recorded by Earth itself, would have resonated in the morphogenetic field of humanity, embedding itself as a code in future generations. A seed vibrational field, like a spiritual instruction archived deep within the human soul, ready to be activated when the correct frequency, internal or external, is reached. DNA, in this sense, is not just inheritance, it's an altar. Various mystical traditions suggest that the human body is a temple, and DNA, the book of life. It's no coincidence that the Apocalypse mentions this book as something that will be opened at the end of times. What opens is not external, it's internal. The book of life is the vibrational structure encoded in each cell, waiting for the call to awaken. And what would this call be? The right vibration, the lost sound, the Christic frequency, that which was emitted at the moment when Jesus declared Tetelestai, not as an end, but as an activation code. This idea is not merely spiritual. Science is beginning to bravely delve into this mystery. Russian researchers like Peter Garyaev have investigated how DNA can be influenced by spoken words, sound frequencies, and even mental intention. Their experiments have shown that the genetic code responds to vibrational stimuli with reorganization and healing. This confirms what mystics have always known, that words have power, literal power. But the deeper question is, what if there exists a master word, a matrix frequency that reorders everything? Jesus, as the embodied Christ consciousness, did not come just to teach. He came to encode. Every gesture, every word, every miracle had a precise vibrational structure. But his last word, spoken with the power of sacrifice, with the seal of fulfilled purpose, seems to have been a final download, a complete code, a field of light encapsulated in sound. When emitted, it crossed not only the air, but time itself, and it touched the biological structure of those who were there, and all who would come after. That's why the first followers of Jesus, Peter, John, Mary Magdalene, reported mystical phenomena after his death, visions, healings, ecstasies, because something in them had been activated. The vibrational field of the word was recorded in the DNA of their bodies and, through practice, love, and surrender, began to be reactivated. The Christ presence became alive in them. Like a silent network of souls carrying the sound, They began to transmit this frequency through laying on of hands, speech, presence. What was conveyed there was not doctrine, it was vibration, and this vibration lies dormant in all humanity, like a hidden echo that can only be heard when the soul is quiet and the heart aligns. That's why so many, today, even without understanding anything about the Bible or theology, feel the call. They cry when they hear certain songs, they get chills from ancient words, they are moved by movies about Jesus, because the DNA is trying to remember. The cell recognizes the original vibration, the spirit hears what the intellect does not understand. On a deeper level, spiritual DNA, that is, the energetic structure that inhabits our subtle field, operates like an antenna. It is constantly seeking resonance. When it finds a compatible vibrational field, it activates memories, awakens gifts, initiates healing. It's as if the sound emitted at the cross is still reverberating, and those who tune into it begin to awaken to a new reality, a life in a different key, a way of existing more aligned with absolute love and eternal truth. This antenna is shaped by everything we've experienced, traumas, emotions, ancestry, but it can also be purified. And here lies the heart of the spiritual journey, silencing to listen, cleansing to remember, surrendering to awaken. Jesus showed the way, but not through dogma, through vibration. What he left behind were not rules. It was a frequency, a universal password, a sound that, when felt internally, resonates with our DNA and initiates transformation, the metanoia, the vibrational rebirth. Therefore, the mystery of Tetelestai is not theological, it's cellular, it is inscribed in our deepest fibers, and it can only be accessed by frequency, by purity of heart, by real presence. The torn veil was not only in the Temple of Jerusalem, it was in our genetic field. The sacred now inhabits the body, and the living temple is the one that vibrates in unison with the original word, the one that is not heard with the ears, but is recognized with the spirit. And in this silent recognition, the DNA bends. The light turns on, the mission reveals itself. Because everything that seemed to be outside, the sound, the sky, the salvation, now manifests within each being ready to listen to the call of the last word which, in truth, was the first of a new creation. Imagine standing at the foot of a cross where the impossible happened. Not just the death of the Master, but the tearing of the veil, the trembling of the earth, the sky in sudden darkness. Now imagine what happens in the vibrational field of those who witness such an event. The final sound, Tetelestai, not only pierced the air, it pierced the chests of those who were there, encoded itself in their bodies, imprinted itself on their souls. Jesus' disciples, still not intellectually understanding what had happened, began to carry within them a code, a living echo of that original frequency. The impact of this moment was not just emotional, it was cellular, it was vibrational. Pedro, who had previously denied the Master, felt stripped bare. John, the beloved disciple, seemed to have plunged into contemplative silence. Mary Magdalene, the first to see him resurrected, experienced such an intense shift in perception that her physical eyes did not recognize him, but her soul did. This non-recognition is revealing. Jesus was no longer vibrating at the same physical frequency. He had become a field of light, a field of spiritual resonance that only pure hearts could access. The resurrection of Jesus was not just a return to the body. It was the full manifestation of his original vibration, now free from the limitations of the flesh. When he appears to the disciples after the crucifixion, he comes in even with the doors closed. This is not a physical miracle, it's a vibrational affirmation. He began to operate in a dimension where matter was no longer an obstacle, where his frequency could be perceived by spiritual affinity and not by spatial location. And what he came to do there, in these post-death encounters, was to seal an invisible contract, to transmit the field they should now carry. For 40 days after his resurrection, Jesus instructed the disciples in secret. What he taught, almost nothing was recorded. What reaches us are fragments, echoes, allegories, But all accounts converge on the same impression. There was something that could not be said, only revealed. Something that was not transmitted through words, but through presence. Those days were a vibrational initiation. Each disciple became a living capsule of the Christ frequency, and their mission was not only to teach, but to vibrate. The hidden mission of the disciples was to preserve the field, not just to preach the gospel, but to keep the frequency alive. They became amphorae of the original sound. Hence the healings, the miracles, the gifts. It wasn't theater. It was vibration in action. The laying on of hands worked because they had been tuned into the resurrection field. And the frequency activated dormant codes in people, generating realignments that we would today call quantum regeneration. It was something alive, an invisible sound that communicated directly with spiritual DNA. But this mission had enemies. The Roman Empire and the religious system of the time quickly understood that this was not just a new doctrine, but a threat to the spiritual control of humanity. Therefore, the persecution was relentless. Those who carried the vibrational field of Christ were hunted. Some were killed, others hid. And some, like Mary Magdalene, took the field to secret places. The story of the disciples is intertwined with the story of the preservation of an energy field that could not be extinguished. Mary Magdalene, in particular, became the guardian of a silent legacy. Persecuted, misunderstood, reduced to an archetype of repentance, when in fact she was the first to recognize the resurrected field. She carried this code to regions like Gaul, now southern France, where esoteric traditions claim she initiated secret spiritual lineages. Her true mission was not to found churches, but to keep the frequency alive through internal practices, a direct connection with the original sound. She became a walking temple of the Tetelestai. Pedro and João also followed different paths. Pedro led the external organization, the visible construction of Christianity. But João remained in the shadows, cultivating the mystical side of the message. His gospel is the most vibrational, the most symbolic. In the beginning was the Word. João understood that what Jesus carried was sound, was resonance, was organized light. And for this reason, his texts are portals. Read with an open heart, they vibrate. They transmit something beyond words. Pentecost, that moment when tongues of fire descended upon the disciples, was not just a supernatural event. It was a collective vibrational reactivation, as if the Christic field, already imprinted in their bodies, was ignited from within. Fire is a symbol of transmutation, and tongues, a symbol of sound. The sound returned, the code was activated, and from there, the disciples began to vibrate at a different frequency, a frequency that directly touched those around them, healing, awakening, rescuing. But over time, this frequency was gradually muffled. Dogmas, institutions, hierarchies, and fears began to suffocate the original sound. The living field turned to stone. The vibration turned into ritual. The living Christ became an idol. And the hidden mission of the disciples, to preserve the sound, the field, the code, was buried under layers of theology. However, this field never extinguished. It hid itself. It went into latency. It concealed itself where no one could forcibly reach it, in the hearts of prepared souls who would be reborn centuries later to hear it again. Those who awaken today are not receiving something new. They are reactivating what was secretly delivered 2,000 years ago. The field still lives. The sound still vibrates. The mission of the disciples still pulses, now silently, in every being that feels the call without knowing how to explain. It is the code of Christ being reignited, not in cathedrals, but in bodies, not in books, but in cells. And this hidden mission, previously reserved for a few, now begins to emerge in the awakened collective. Thus, the disciples were not just witnesses, they were conductors. They were not just followers, they were bridges. They carried the most powerful frequency ever emitted on this earth and secretly sowed it, so that one day when the world was ready, the code would be reactivated, and perhaps that time is now. Since the dawn of humanity, the Word has been treated with reverence. Long before it was written, it was sound, rite, rhythm. Among the ancients, to pronounce something was not merely to describe, it was to create. In Mesopotamia, gods created by naming. In Egypt, the hieroglyph was not a letter, it was a sacred vibration. And among the Hebrews, the name of God was so holy that it could not even be pronounced, not out of fear, but out of respect for its creative power. All these cultures knew what science is only now beginning to perceive. That sound, when emitted with intention, reorganizes reality. This understanding of the word as a frequency shaping existence is not isolated. It permeates traditions from all continents. In Hinduism, the primary mantra Aum is considered the original sound of the universe, the vibration from which everything emerges and returns. It's not just a word, but an energy field. When chanting it, practitioners are not just reciting, they are resonating with the source. The same happens in Sufism with the repetition of Hu, the essential name of God in mystical Islam, considered the pure sound of divine presence. Interestingly, these ancestral sounds have simple acoustic structures, but they are profoundly powerful. They are phonemes that, when repeated in a state of surrender, alter the nervous system, rebalance the body's electromagnetic field, and expand perception. Modern neuroscience has already demonstrated that mantras and sacred chants activate areas of the brain related to well-being, spiritual connection, and transcendence. This confirms what ancient masters knew by intuition and experience can now be proven by science. The word has power because it vibrates. When we return to Jesus' Tetelestai in light of this understanding, something becomes evident. He didn't just speak, he emitted. His last word, although technically Greek, carried an intention that transcended language. Its vibrational structure, its intonation at the moment of total surrender, its emission at the peak of submission, created a field that cannot be translated. It's one of those sounds that, like Aum or Hu, doesn't need to be understood. It needs to be felt. It touched the place where language and spirit meet. In Jewish tradition, there is the Kabbalah, which teaches that the letters of the Hebrew alphabet are not just graphic symbols, but energy channels. Each letter represents a frequency, each word a specific energy configuration. Prayers are not pleas, but vibrational structures that align the soul with the divine. The same is true for the Psalms, which for centuries were chanted as songs, not just for their beauty, but because the sounds activated internal states of healing, protection, and communion. In ancestral Africa, the use of drums and songs in healing rituals and communion with ancestors follows the same logic. The sung words invoke presences. The sounds are not for entertainment, but to open portals. And in the indigenous Americas, the use of songs in extinct languages, orally transmitted, keeps alive a spiritual frequency that resists time and forgetting. It's as if all traditions, in distinct ways, carry fragments of an original sound, a primordial echo that reminds us of our common origin. Jesus, when emitting his final sound, was consciously or not, tuning into this universal field. The Tetelestai was not exclusively Christian. It was a matrix frequency, a sound aligned with the sacred tones of earth. The difference? He did it in a state of absolute sacrifice, in total coherence between soul, heart, mind, and body. This level of purity in the vibrational act is what transforms a sound into a code. What was sound became a seal. What was a word became a field. But what truly distinguishes these sacred sounds from common words? Intention, emotion, surrender. A word uttered mechanically is noise, but a word spoken with presence, awareness, and purpose is a living wave. Water responds to this. Cells respond. The spirit responds. The work of Masaru Emoto, though controversial among academics, reveals an essential principle. When words like love, peace, or thank you are directed at water, its crystals form harmonic mandalas. The opposite happens with words like hate or fear. This is not superstition, it's subtle physics. In the Gospels, Jesus heals with his words. He calms the storm with a single sentence. He resurrects the dead with a call. He expels demons with a command. He knew what he was saying, but more than that, how he was saying it. His voice was a clear frequency channel, without noise, without ego, without separation. His speech was a vibration aligned with the whole. And that's why his last word didn't die with him. Because the frequency emitted at that moment carried absolute purity, supreme coherence, and that's why it remains alive to this day. There is a language that cannot be translated. It is felt in the bones, in the field, in intuition. These are the whispers of the soul, the chills when hearing a phrase that touches something you didn't know was there. It is vibrational memory. It is the word not spoken, but eternal. Tetelestai thus joins other sacred sounds that cross generations not by logic, but by resonance. It has become a code that, when accessed with purity, activates higher realities. This is the reason why many prayers are chanted in ancient languages. Not because these languages are magical, but because they carry phonemes whose vibration has been imbued with power over the centuries. Latin, Hebrew, Sanskrit are sonic vessels that store humanity's spiritual memory. And when chanted with reverence, these sounds reactivate the frequency of the original field. Jesus, in using Greek for his last word, did not choose a wrong language. He redeemed it. He filled it with divine sound. Therefore, the frequency of the word is not a modern invention, nor a mystical exclusivity. It is a universal principle, a sacred science, a bridge between worlds. Jesus knew this, the ancient masters knew it, and now, many of us are beginning to remember. What is at stake is not the content of the word, but its vibration. The call is not to repeat the sound, but to vibrate in tune with the state it expresses. What was said on the cross is not an end. It is a sonic seed that continues to echo, waiting for those who are ready to listen with the Spirit. Not everything that was said by Jesus merely echoed in the air. Some words, like seeds, seem to have plunged into the earth, absorbed not only by human souls, but by the soil itself. And this is where the mystery expands. What if the earth, more than a witness to the crucifixion, was also a receptacle for the vibrational code left by him? What if the sound emitted on the cross reverberated at strategic points, anchoring in specific locations, like frequencies waiting for resonance to activate again? The ancients knew this. The earth is not inert. It is a living, pulsating organism, endowed with memory and consciousness. Its mountains, caves, rivers, and deserts keep records. Just as there are meridians in the human body, there are also energy lines that cross the planet. They are called ley lines, invisible routes where the Earth's telluric energy flows. And, interestingly, many of the most important events in the spiritual history of humanity have occurred exactly at these energetic crossroads. Stonehenge, the pyramids of Egypt, Machu Picchu, Easter Island, Chartres Cathedral. All these places were not chosen by chance. They were erected over intersections of these lines, as if their structures served as amplifiers, receivers, or conductors of spiritual information. They are portals, places where the veil between worlds is thinner, where the invisible whispers louder. And Jerusalem, more precisely Golgotha, the place of crucifixion, is no exception to this rule. There are indications that this region occupies one of these planetary nodal points. The crucifixion of Jesus in this sense was not random. It occurred at a vibrational intersection point, and when he uttered his last word, this point was energized. A field was activated. The sacred sound, emitted by a being in a state of absolute surrender, anchored itself in that place like a vibrational seal. That's why even today, pilgrims inexplicably weep when visiting these places, because the energy has not disappeared. It rests there, vibrating in silence, waiting for sensitive hearts to tune into its frequency. And what if this vibrational code was not confined to Jerusalem? What if, through the ley lines, it spread like an electric current, touching other points on the planet? It's possible that certain sacred sites around the world are energetically connected to this specific moment of crucifixion. Like the planet's synapses, these points form a network of consciousness that interacts with the human field. Upon stepping on these places, something awakens. The sound is silent, but the soul hears. The earth holds secrets, and responds to those who listen with reverence. Indigenous traditions understood this mystery. For them, certain mounds, caves, and springs were places of power, not just because they were beautiful, but because invisible forces intersected there. Shamans and healers would travel miles to perform rituals at these spots. They knew that the earth speaks, and more than that the earth remembers. The earth records major spiritual events just as the body records traumas or healings. And the moment of crucifixion, with all its emotional, energetic, and vibrational field, was imprinted not only in human hearts, but on the planet itself. Minerals, crystals, ancient rocks, all of them have the ability to store information. They are like natural hard drives. In many esoteric traditions, it is believed that Earth's crystals contain the Akashic records, the memories of everything that has ever been experienced. And some say that at the moment of Jesus' death, a subtle wave was emitted that penetrated these deep layers of the earth, as if the earth's crust itself had recorded the sound of redemption. An inaudible sound, but as real as the beating of an awakened heart. Intriguingly, earthquakes were recorded at the exact moment of Christ's death, as narrated in the Gospels. The earth shook, fissures opened up. This is more than a geological fact. It's a vibrational response. The earth didn't react to the death. It reacted to the sound, to the frequency, to the field of absolute love being released. It was a vibrational shock that reverberated through invisible lines, reaching distant places and, perhaps, activating other power points, like cosmic bells being rung in sequence. Jesus, as the Christ consciousness, was fully aware of the earth's language. His gestures, his silences, his movements, all followed a sacred geometry. He moved as one who follows invisible maps, and the crucifixion was the end point, or the ignition point, of an energetic outline drawn across the planet. Each miracle, each teaching, each prayer were like notes of a sacred symphony that culminated in the moment where the final sound would be cast upon the world and embedded in its soil. Today, many feel the call to visit certain places without knowing why. It's as if something within whispers, "Go there." It could be a hill, a cave, an ancient church, a ruined temple, but it's not tourism. It's resonance. The spirit senses the field. Some may cry, have visions, awaken latent gifts when stepping on sacred ground. Because in these places, the vibration of the last word still dances among the stones. The earth has not forgotten. The code has not been lost. It pulses where there is silence and presence. Finally, it is crucial to understand that Earth is not just the backdrop of humanity's spiritual history. It is the protagonist. It vibrates, it feels, it participates. And like every living consciousness, it too was touched by the event of the cross. The sound of Jesus resonated in its womb and still echoes today. Therefore, walking through the world with reverence is more than spirituality. It is tuning into the living field of creation. Each step, a listening. Each silence, a prayer. Each place, a portal. The codes left by Jesus are not only in the texts, nor only in the heavens. They are also on earth, in the stones, in the lines that cross continents, in the winds that whisper ancient songs, in the living memory of the planet that still echoes the sound of a word that has not died, but waits, silently, for those who have ears to hear with the heart. There is something in you that has heard this sound before. Even if your mind does not remember, your soul does. The vibrational field emitted by Jesus on the cross, that last word uttered with absolute intention, was not only captured by the air or the earth, it was recorded in the invisible fabric of human consciousness, a sound so pure, so elevated, that it penetrated the veils of individuality and nestled quietly deep within the collective soul. And since then, it pulses in wait, like a seed lurking for the right light. This code is not an intellectual enigma. It does not decipher with reasoning. It activates by frequency, by tuning, by vibrational state. Therefore, it is not enough to know. It is necessary to remember, and the memory here is not mental. It is cellular. It is energetic. It is the moment when the heart aligns, the ego silences, and something subtle lights up from within, a warmth, an emotion without a name, a tear without reason. This is the code trying to emerge, because it was never destroyed, just obscured by the density of material life. To reactivate it, there is no formula, but there is a path. The first step is silence. Not the silence of sound absence, but internal silence. The vibrational stillness that allows the original frequency to find space. The sound of Jesus on the cross, his final word, does not resonate where there is inner noise, judgment, hurry, conflict. He needs fertile ground, presence, surrender. And that's why so many, when entering deep meditative states or authentic prayers, feel an inexplicable call. It's the code, knocking on the door of consciousness. The second step is embracing vulnerability. Jesus activated the code at the height of pain and surrender. He didn't do it in a palace, but on a cross, not surrounded by glory, but by abandonment. This teaches us something vital. The portal opens in moments of total surrender. When pride falls, when control unravels, when the heart breaks, but continues to love. It's in this place, so human, so fragile, that the Christic field enters. Not to comfort, but to transform. Many people today are going through processes of deconstruction. They lose jobs, relationships, certainties, health. And what if all this is just the field preparing the soil for the original sound to emerge? What if the collapse is the invitation to rebirth? There are times when life brings us to the ground, not to destroy us, but to tune us in. Because it is there, in the silence of the fall, that the spirit hears what the mind never understood. And at that moment, the code begins to vibrate, like an ancient familiar sound, coming from within. The third step is deep listening, learning to listen with the spirit. The code won't come as an audible voice, but as a pulse, a feeling, a gentle certainty. It's what mystics call gnosis, a knowledge that wasn't learned but revealed. When the code begins to be activated, the external world remains the same, but something changes inside. Words gain new weight, songs provoke tears, eyes become more sensitive to beauty, synchronicity intensifies, the soul moves. This call to remembrance is not individual, it is occurring on a planetary scale. Thousands, millions of people are awakening simultaneously. They do not follow the same religion, they do not share the same beliefs, but they feel the same fire, the same yearning, the same sensation of being pulled toward something greater, truer, deeper. This movement is not a spiritual fad. It is the Christic field resurfacing. It is the original frequency of Jesus resonating in the weave of humanity and reactivating what was sown. The planet also responds. The Earth's frequency, measured by science, has been fluctuating, rising. The peaks of the Schumann resonance are echoes of this activation. It's as if the planet, having received the sound of the crucifixion, is now returning it in waves, calling its children home. The vibration increases, and those who carry the code begin to awaken, not by rational choice, but by vibrational synchrony, like flowers that bloom when they feel the warmth of the sun. This activation has symptoms: physical, emotional, spiritual, unexplainable fatigue, desire for silence, rejection of superficial distractions, yearning for truth, intense dreams, memories that don't seem like your own. All of this is normal. It's the field being reconfigured. It's the code rearranging within your inner layers, like an old software being replaced by a new one, which is finally compatible with Earth's new frequency. And what to do? How to proceed? The answer is simple, but it requires courage. To stay present, to breathe, to feel, to love, even without understanding, even without a map. Because the code does not respond to control, but to trust. It opens like a flower bud, gentle, silent, perfect. And when this happens, you become more than a seeker. You become the field. You become the frequency. You become a living extension of that original sound. The call to remembrance is, in fact, a return to your essence. It's not a novelty. It's a home. And this home is not in temples or doctrines. It's within, Jesus planted the code on earth, but he deposited it in hearts. And these hearts are now being awakened, one by one, with tears, with faith, with silence. The code is being activated, and you are not here by chance. And what if everything we seek has always been housed in the quietest and most sacred space there is, not in distant mountains nor in stone temples, but deep within the self, in that place where no word penetrates, where no logic reaches? The torn veil of the temple was not just a physical sign, nor a religious event. It was the final act of a larger plan, to reveal to humanity that the sacred is not separate, it is not outside, it is here, it is now, it is within you. For centuries we have been taught to look outward, to seek redemption in distant figures, in dogmatic structures, in empty rituals. But the death and resurrection of Jesus were not just historical events. They were maps, living languages pointing to a mystery much closer than we dare to admit. The portal is not a place, it's a state. And the veil that was torn in that epic moment was the veil of human consciousness, a psychic boundary that prevented us from seeing that we are living temples, that we are dwellings of the divine vibration. In the heart of the ancient temple of Jerusalem was the Holy of Holies, the space where the presence dwelled. It was accessed only once a year by a single man and under strict rituals. But upon dying and uttering his last word, Jesus tore this exclusive access. He universalized the sacred. He opened the heart of the temple, and in doing so revealed that the true Holy of Holies is not geographical. It is internal. It is the vibrational center of our being, the divine consciousness that inhabits us, even when we forget about it. Today, with everything we know about the heart's electromagnetic field, about the pineal gland as a spiritual receptor, and about the brain as a vibrational oscillator, it becomes evident that the human body is, literally, a temple. Each cell pulses in sync with the earth. Each heartbeat is an echo of the universal drum. The sound of the cross, the code of Tetelestai, is not lost in the past. It resonates within the heart of every being who dares to quiet and listen to what pulses in the invisible. When the veil was torn, it was not just a physical separation that was undone. It was the illusion of separation between human and divine. Jesus did not come to make us feel small before God. He came to reveal that we are one with the source. He himself said, "You are gods." But religion, fearful of the power that this represents, chose to hide this portal. It preferred to rebuild veils, erect new temples, create new rituals. But Christ is alive in those who realize that the true altar is in the chest. The portal is where you least look for it. It opens when you are silent, when you surrender, when you love. It doesn't respond to formulas, but to frequency. And this frequency is activated by deep states of gratitude, compassion, silence, and presence. When these states become reality within you, the veil begins to dissolve. And then, without warning, you feel it. A peace without a name, a certainty without explanation, a clarity that doesn't come from the mind. In that moment, you've entered, you've crossed over, the portal has opened within. It's not a mystical journey. It's a return. Because the portal that was torn, in fact, was never closed. It just seemed inaccessible due to the veils of ego, pain, fear, haste. But when these veils fall, when the layers of conditioning dissolve, the light breaks out. Not from outside in, but from inside out. You are the place of manifestation. You are the Holy of Holies. You are the meeting point between heaven and earth. And then you understand why the sound of Jesus has not died, because he planted this vibration in you. When he said it is finished, he was not just talking about his mission. He declared that the path was complete, that the separation was undone, that access was granted, not by merit, but by essence, not by conquest, but by remembrance. He did not demand, he revealed. And his revelation is alive in every being who looks within and recognizes, I am part of the whole. I am an expression of love. The activation of this inner portal transforms everything. The senses change. reality changes, the way you see others changes. You stop acting out of fear, scarcity, survival, and start living by coherence, presence, vibration. Love ceases to be a concept and becomes a state. Faith ceases to be a belief and becomes a direct experience. Prayer ceases to be a plea and becomes alignment. Everything repositions itself. Because now the temple walks, the portal breathes, the sacred pulses with each step. And if there is a call now, it's to live with this awareness, not as a burden, but as a liberating revelation, knowing that the veil has already been torn, that there is no more separation, that access is free, constant, real, and that everything that prevents your entry has already fallen, even if your mind hasn't realized it. The deepest truth is this: you are already inside. You always have been. You just needed to remember. Thus, the journey that started with a word and a tear ends with a silent return to the inner home. And this home does not need walls, dogmas, intermediaries. It only needs you, whole, surrendered, present. Because the gateway is within, and it is open. Now that you've come this far, mind unfettered, take a moment to breathe. Close your eyes if you wish. Feel. Is there something vibrating within you? A warmth, a memory, a tear that doesn't explain why? Perhaps, just perhaps, you've just crossed a veil you didn't even know still existed. And now I want to invite you to leave a mark. Yes, in the comments. But not just any comment. I want you to share which part of this journey touched your spirit. It could be a sentence, an emotion, a moment from the video that made your heart beat differently. If you felt something inside you was activated, write, "I am the portal, I remember." Or tell me, at what point in your life are you feeling this call to tear the veil and reconnect with your sacred center? Together, let's create a field of expression in the comments. Each of your words is a vibration, and by expressing yourself, you activate, you connect, you inspire. And before you leave, don't forget, the journey doesn't end here. On your screen now is the next video in this ongoing spiritual journey. The Book of 33 Steps, the hidden map Jesus left for enlightenment. In it, we reveal the hidden map left by Christ himself, a code of ascension in 33 vibrational steps, accessible only to those who dare to go beyond the surface. If this video moved you, the next one will transform you. We'll meet there, with love, truth, and vibration.